came home from taking my mother to her doctor's appointment to find a stranger measuring our living room, and a sold sticker slapped across the for sale sign my brother had planted in the yard without telling me. My mother, 91, gripped my arm and whispered, "Where are we going to live?" And I looked at the real estate agent and I said, "Nobody's going anywhere. Call your buyer. Tell them the seller doesn't own this house. Let me back up. My name is Renata Voss. I'm 46 years old and my brother tried to sell the house our mother and I were living in. The house I'd moved into to care for her, the house our family had owned for 50 years, out from under both of us. Pocketing the money and leaving his elderly mother and his sister homeless. He nearly did it. The only reason he failed is that our mother, 5 years earlier, had done something quietly brilliant that my brother never bothered to check. Let me tell you how we got here. There were two of us, me and my older brother Klaus, and we could not have been more different. I was the one who stayed. Klaus was the one who left, not geographically. He lived 20 minutes away, but in every way that mattered. When our father died and our mother began to decline, it was understood, in the silent way families understand these things, that Klaus was too busy and too important to be involved in her care, and that I, divorced and with grown children, was the natural choice to step in. So I stepped in, fully. I gave up my apartment and moved into our childhood home to care for our mother, Ingrid, who at 86 was beginning the long, slow work of needing everything done for her. And over the next 5 years, I did it. I did all of it, the medications, the meals, the bathing, the doctor's appointments, the long nights, the slow grief of watching a sharp woman fade. I put my own life on hold. I became, without pay and without thanks, a full-time caregiver in the house I'd grown up in so that my mother could stay in her home instead of a facility. Klaus visited occasionally. He'd come for an hour, sit with Mom, take a phone call in the other room, and leave. He was, to the extended family, a devoted son who did what he could, given his busy, important life. Me, he was a ghost who showed up just often enough to maintain the appearance of a son. And the whole time, Klaus was thinking about the house, because our childhood home, in 50 years, had become valuable. The neighborhood had changed, the land was worth real money now. And Klaus, I would learn, had been looking at that house not as our mother's home, but as an asset that was in his mind, half his, and being wasted on Mom living in it and me caring for her. He wanted the money. And he was not willing to wait for our mother to die to get it. Here is how the betrayal unfolded, and I want to walk through it carefully, because it happened fast once it started. The first sign was Klaus taking a sudden interest in Mom's legal affairs. He began asking questions about the deed, about power of attorney, about getting things in order. He framed it as responsible planning. He offered to handle the paperwork, to take that burden off me since I was so busy with Mom's care. It sounded helpful. It was reconnaissance. And Klaus did something that in retrospect was the whole plan announcing itself. He got our mother, on a day when she was confused, and she had many confused days, by then, to sign a document. He told the family it was a routine power of attorney update. What it actually was, I'd learn, was Klaus maneuvering to gain control over Mom's affairs, positioning himself to make decisions about her property. And then, while I was at a doctor's appointment with Mom, Klaus had actually asked me about the timing of that appointment. I realized later, so he'd know when the house would be empty. Klaus put the house on the market. He listed our family home, with our mother and me living in it, for sale. He did it quietly, through an agent, betting that he could get it sold, and the deal far enough along that it would be too late to stop before I even found out. I found out when I came home to a stranger measuring the living room and a sold sticker on a sign I'd never seen go up. I want you to picture it. My 91-year-old mother, exhausted from her appointment, walking up to her own home of 50 years to find a real estate agent inside and a sold sign in the yard. She didn't understand at first. And she did, in the partial way she understood things by then, and she gripped my arm and whispered, "Where are we going to live?" And something in me that had spent 5 years being patient and tired and unthanked went very cold and very clear. Because here is what Klaus didn't know, what he'd never bothered to check, because he was so certain the house was his to take. 5 years earlier, right around when I moved in to care for Mom, our mother had done something. She was still sharp then, still fully herself, and she had seen, with a clarity I didn't appreciate at the time, exactly how this might go. She knew her son. She'd watched Klaus my whole life, and she understood, in the way mothers understand their children even when they wish they didn't, that Klaus valued the house more than he valued her living in it. And she understood that I was the one giving up my life to care for her, so she'd gone to a lawyer, quietly. Without telling Klaus, and honestly without fully telling me, she mentioned getting some papers in order, and I hadn't paid much attention, buried as I was in the daily work of her care. And what she had done was change the deed to the house. She deeded the house in a way that created a life estate. She retained the right to live there for the rest of her life, and could not be forced out. And crucially, she had structured what happened next so that the house would pass to me. The daughter who cared for her upon her death, and could not be sold out from under her during her life without her genuine competent consent. Klaus was not on the deed in the way he assumed. He had a future interest at best, and no right whatsoever to sell the property while our mother lived. She had, 5 years earlier, foreseeing this exact moment, made the house legally impossible for Klaus to take. The document Klaus had gotten Mom to sign on a confused day didn't override any of this. You cannot use a power of attorney obtained through a confused signature to sell a house. The principal has a protected life estate into yourself or your buyer. Over the objection of the interested parties, what Klaus had built his whole scheme on was a house he did not own the right to sell. I didn't know all the legal specifics standing in that living room. But I knew my mother had put the house in her and my name, years ago. She told me that much once, and I'd half-registered it. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that Klaus had no right to be selling anything. So I looked at the real estate agent, and I said the sentence that started to unwind it. Nobody's going anywhere. Call your buyer. Tell them the seller doesn't own this house. The agent, to her credit, went pale and made some calls, because a good agent does not want to be anywhere near a sale where ownership is in dispute. Here is what I did next. First, I got the deed. I found my mother's papers, the ones she'd put in order 5 years earlier, and there it was. The life estate, the transfer, my name, the protection. I took it to an elder law attorney named Priya Raman that same week, and Priya read it and said, "Your mother knew exactly what she was doing. This is airtight. Your brother cannot sell this house. He never could. Whatever he's told a buyer, whatever he's got your mother to sign recently, none of it overrides a properly executed deed with a life estate from 5 years ago when your mother was competent. He's been trying to sell something that isn't his." Second, Priya and I stopped the sale cold. A formal notice to the agent and the would-be buyer that the seller had no authority to convey the property, backed by the recorded deed, ended the transaction instantly. No buyer proceeds against a recorded life estate. The sale collapsed. Third, and this is where it turned from defense to reckoning, we looked at what Klaus had actually done. Because trying to sell property you don't own, by using a power of attorney obtained from a confused elderly person to override her protected interest, is not a family disagreement. Depending on the specifics, it ranges from civil fraud to elder financial abuse, which is a serious matter that courts and adult protective services take very seriously. Klaus had exposed himself badly. Fourth, I addressed the document Klaus had got Mom to sign. Priya helped us have it invalidated, establishing that it was obtained when Mom lacked capacity, with medical documentation of her condition on the relevant date, and we replaced the compromised power of attorney with a proper one, protecting Mom from any further attempts. Klaus's control over her affairs, which he'd engineered to enable the sale, was stripped away entirely. Now, the confrontation. I didn't have to chase Klaus down. He came to me furious the moment the sale collapsed. He arrived at the house he tried to sell, and accused me of sabotaging the deal, of costing the family money, of being selfish for wanting to keep Mom in a house that could be put to better use. He actually said that our dying mother's home of 50 years could be put to better use as cash in his pocket. And I let him rage, and then I said, "Klaus, sit down because you don't understand what you've done and you need to." I laid out the deed. "Mom did this 5 years ago. She has a life estate. You cannot sell this house while she's alive. You never could. The whole thing you've been trying to do was impossible from the start because Mom saw you coming half a decade ago." His face changed as he understood. "And the paper you had her sign when she was confused," I continued, "is invalidated with medical documentation of her capacity that day. You used a power of attorney obtained from a confused 91-year-old to try to sell her house to fund yourself. Priya, my lawyer, has told me exactly what that's called legally. It's elder financial abuse, and she's told me it's reportable. I let that sit. I'm not going to destroy you, Klaus. You're my brother, and destroying you would hurt Mom, and I won't do that to her. But you are done. Done making decisions about Mom's affairs, done coming near this house, done pretending you're a devout son. The house is protected. Mom is protected. And if you ever try anything like this again, the report gets made, and you can explain to court why you tried to sell your dying mother's home out from under her. Here is how it ended. Klaus was finished, and he knew it. The sale was dead, permanently. His control over Mom's affairs was gone, replaced with a proper power of attorney held by me, with oversight. And the threat of an elder abuse report, real, documented, and hanging over him, kept him in line in a way nothing else ever had. He didn't apologize. Men like Klaus don't. But he retreated, and he stayed retreated, because the alternative was a court and a criminal label, and the destruction of the respectable son image he valued more than he'd ever valued Mom. My mother lived another 2 years in her home. In her home, which is the only thing I ever wanted, and the only thing she'd wanted, and the exact thing Klaus tried to take. I cared for her to the end, in the house she protected, and she died in her own bed, in her own room, with her own things around her, which is a gift not everyone gets, and which my brother tried to deny her for money. And the house came to me, as she'd arranged, because she'd known, 5 years out, which of her children would be there at the end, and which would be trying to sell the walls around her. My mother's last clear-headed act of love was to look down the length of her own decline, see exactly how it might be exploited, and build a wall of paper that her son could not climb over. She protected me and she protected herself, half a decade before either of us needed it, and she never made a fuss about it, and I didn't even fully understand what she'd done until the day it saved us. Klaus and I are not close. How could we be? I watched him try to sell the house with our mother inside it. But he comes to family things now, chastened and quiet, and I let him, for the memory of Mom, who would have wanted her children in the same room even after everything. My brother put a sold sign in the yard of a house he didn't own, betting that his sister was too busy caring for their mother to stop him. He forgot that our mother, 5 years before, sharp and clear-eyed and knowing her son to the bone, had already made sure the one thing he wanted was the one thing he could never take. She couldn't stop herself from fading. But she made absolutely certain that, when her son came for her home, her daughter would be holding the deed.